Good morning, guys. Happy blessed Wednesday, Wednesday the 8th of July, and thank you for joining me in Storyteller's Corner and welcome. Now we're going back to our Victorian scandal in London, uh, Between Duty and Desire, and this is chapter 33, The Witness in the Dark. They've been seen. So let's see what happens to Lady Caroline and Thomas the chauffeur. So, no one slept well at Whitmore House that night. By Lord Wimborne's orders, the house closed itself like a fist. The great front gates were bolted and watched. Footmen were instructed to admit no callers under any circumstances. Lamps remained lit in the lower corridors long past midnight, so that the house itself seemed wakeful, listening, braced, waiting. All four moved through the servants' wing and the family rooms alike with grave efficiency, speaking quietly to staff, reinforcing orders, blocking side entrances that had not been secured in years except against storms. And yet, despite all the precautions, Caroline could not shake the feeling that the true danger had already crossed the threshold long before the doors were barred. Somewhere, someone knew enough to speak. Somewhere, someone had seen. Her aunt had kissed her forehead before sending her upstairs, as though Caroline was once more a frightened child rather than a grown woman at the centre of a scandal threatening to devour them all. "Try to rest," she whispered. Caroline had nearly laughed. Rest? As if rest was still a thing available to her. Now, deep into the night, she stood at the window of her bedchamber in her dressing gown, the room lit only by the low flame of a single lamp and the grey wash of moonlight through the glass. The ground below looked deceptively peaceful. The gravel drive gleamed pale and empty. Bare trees shivered in the wind. A single lantern burned near the stable yard, casting a weak circle of gold against the dark. Everything appeared still, but the stillness felt wrong. Not calm, watching. She pressed her fingers against the cold window pane and tried to think rationally. A witness. Mercer had not yet said servant, family friend, neighbour or stranger, only that he had witnessed who had seen Caroline and Thomas alone in the garden. It might be a bluff. Men like Mercer traded insinuations. Perhaps he had guessed enough to be dangerous and was merely gambling that fear would force the Wimbornes into a misstep. Excuse me, guys. But it was not a bluff. Caroline closed her eyes. Then someone had seen what they had believed hidden. The winter beneath the oak, reckless nights had slipped out after Thomas's reassignment. The countless glances, touches, whispered conversations in the garden, the terrace and the path near the rose wall. There were too many possibilities, and each one made her pulse race harder. A soft knock on the door. "Come in." It was Helen, her maid, wrapped in a shawl over her nightdress, her face pale with fatigue. "I'm sorry, my lady," she said quietly. "I thought perhaps you might want tea." Caroline's heart softened at once. "That is very kind of you." Helen came in carrying a tray with a teapot, cup, and a small plate of untouched biscuits that neither of them pretended Caroline would eat. As she set the tray down, she hesitated. "My lady." Caroline looked at her. "What is it?" Helen glanced towards the door as if to be certain they were alone. "There's talk downstairs." Caroline's stomach tightened. What kind of talk? "The servants are frightened." Helen lowered her voice, not only because of a newspaper man, but because Mr. Hawthorne has begun asking questions. Caroline straightened. "Questions?" "Yes." Helen twisted her hands together. "He's trying to find out whether anyone saw anything or spoke to anyone in the village. He's been through the servants' hall twice. He spoke to the grooms, the kitchen maids, the stable boys. Even Mrs. Finch looked shaken, and I've never seen that woman frightened of anything but undercooked fish." Caroline managed a faint smile at that thought, and it vanished almost at once. "Do you think one of the staff betrayed us?" Helen looked miserable. No one wants to say it aloud, but yes. Caroline sat slowly on the edge of the bed. The idea had been lurking in her mind from the moment that note was read, but hearing it Spoken made it colder, more real. A betrayal from inside the house. Not merely gossip drifting in from London drawing rooms, but someone under Whitmore House roof carrying private moments into the hands of a newspaper. Has anyone been accused yet? Caroline asked. No, my lady, not openly. Mr. Hawthorne's too careful for that. But everyone knows what he's asking without him needing to say it plainly. Ellen's eyes filled with distress. We're all looking at one another now. Every whisper sounds guilty. Even friendship feels suspicious. It's awful. Caroline reached for her hand. I'm sorry. Ellen shook her head quickly. No, my lady, I don't mean... I know what you meant, she says. Caroline squeezed her hand gently, but I am sorry all the same. For the staff, for the household, for Thomas, for herself, for the impossible web of consequences that seemed to widen with every hour. When Ellen had gone, Caroline remained sitting very still, tea untouched in her lap. The room felt suddenly too close, too quiet. Thomas was somewhere in the same house and yet might as well have been miles away. Lord Wimborne's orders had been clear. No one to move about the house unnecessarily. No messages, no private conversations. No one leaves this house tonight. No one. Caroline understood the reason for it. She did. If witnesses existed, if the press had truly found a thread enough to pull, then every careless movement now risked making things worse. And yet, if it did nothing to ease the ache of being separated from Thomas at the precise moment when she most wanted to see his face, hear his voice, and know what he was thinking, because if anyone in Whitmore House was already trying to shoulder the blame alone, it would be him. Down in the servants' wing, Thomas was not sleeping either. He sat on a narrow bed in his room, coat removed, shirt sleeves rolled up, staring at the floorboards with his hands clasped tightly enough to ache. The small room had never felt so confining. A washstand, a chest, a chair, a bed. The room of a servant. The room of a man who has spent years knowing exactly what he stood in the order of the house and somehow still managed to ruin a piece of it. Outside his door, the corridor had gone mostly quiet, but not fully. Every so often he heard footsteps, the low murmur of voices, the creak of old boards. The household was awake in the way people remain awake after disaster, too tired to function, too unsettled to surrender to sleep. He had tried, for perhaps 10 minutes, to lie down. It had been useless. The moment he closed his eyes, memory began its cruel work. Caroline in the garden beneath the old oak, pale in moonlight, her hand in his. Caroline in the stable saying, I love you, as though the world might break and she would speak the word anyway. Caroline in the drawing room refusing Lord Pembroke with a courage that still made his chest ache. Too many moments, too many chances to have been seen. And now one of them, perhaps all of them, might be in the hands of a stranger who meant to turn them into profit. A knock sounded out the door. Thomas rose at once. Come in. It was Hawthorne. The older man looked as if he had not rested in days, for only hours had passed since the reporter's note. His usually immaculate cravat sat slightly askew, and there were shadows beneath his eyes. Hawthorne, Mr. Reed. He stepped inside and shut the door. I hope I'm not interrupting your sleep. Thomas almost smiled. You are not. I did not imagine I would be. For a moment, Hawthorne simply looked at him, not as a superior, not even as a colleague, more like a man trying to decide how much truth another man can bear before morning. As Lord Wimborne sent for him, Thomas asked, No. Hawthorne folded his hands behind his back. This is not official. Thomas expressed sharp and, Then why are you here? Hawthorne did not answer at once. Instead, he crossed to the window and glanced out in the darkness of the stable yard before turning back. Because if there is a witness, I would like to know who it is before the newspapers do. Thomas felt his jaw tighten. So would I. I thought you might. Hawthorne's voice softened, but only by a fraction, as though you might also understand the grounds and household routines well enough to tell me where someone has seen more than they ought. Thomas looked at him carefully. You want my help? Yes, if you are willing to give it. Thomas gave a short, humorous breath. If I can stop this from getting worse for Caroline, I'll help you in any way I can. Hawthorne's eyes flickered. Not surprise, something closer to sorrow. Yes, he said quietly, I know. They spread the estate map across the small writing desk in Thomas's room. It was an old survey map kept for practical use. Stable routes, delivery access, kitchen, gardens, path through the ornamental grounds. Hawthorne must have fetched it from the steward's office on his way in. Together they studied the grounds by lamplight. The reporter's note said only the garden, Hawthorne murmured. That could mean anything. Thomas nodded grimly. The rose walk, the lower terrace, the east lawn, the oak beyond the winter house. Hawthorne looked up. The oak. Thomas did not answer. He did not need to. The silence said enough. Hawthorne traced a finger over the northern side of the garden. If someone was coming back from the village lane by the side path, they might have seen the oak from here. Only in daylight. What about the upper windows? Thomas considered. The blue guest room overlooked part of the lawn, so does the old morning room on the second floor. And the servants' corridors? Only if someone leaned far enough from a west window. Hawthorne's expression darkened. So it could have been someone in the house. Yes. Thomas forced himself to say it. It could also be a groom crossing from the stable to the side gate, or a maid taking ash bucket to the yard, or anyone using the path beyond the edge after dark. Or a stranger. Thomas looked up sharply. Hawthorne nodded. The village path runs close enough to the outer walls at one point if someone knew where to stand. He did not finish. Again, he did not need to. Thomas dragged an hand over his face. How long has Mercer been asking questions? I don't know. Then we start there. Hawthorne looked at him. Meaning? If he only arrived today, perhaps a witness approached him, but if he had been sniffing around the village for days, he may have gone fishing and found someone willing to talk. Hawthorne gave him a small nod. That was my thought as well. They spent nearly an hour reconstructing possibilities. The night Caroline had gone to the garden during Thomas's reassignment. The winter afternoon when they had spoken too long by the rose wall after a family luncheon. The evening after the society ball when Thomas had walked the carriage round and Caroline had lingered by the terrace steps, her gloved fingers brushing his for one dangerous second. Each memory was a blade, not because Thomas regretted them, because he did not, and because each one might now become evidence against her. At last Hawthorne straightened from the map. I have already questioned the obvious staff, the stable boys, the gardeners, the maids who were on the late duty, the footmen assigned to the west wall, and nothing yet. Thomas let out a breath. That doesn't mean much. No. Hawthorne's expression was grim. People lie when frightened, or they tell themselves they are not lying because what they have passed along seems ominous at the time. Thomas's voice hardened. You think someone mentioned seeing us without understanding what it become? I think it is one possibility. And the other? Hawthorne met his gaze. That somebody understood perfectly. The words sat between them like a threat. Thomas thought of the staff he had worked beside for years, or boys he had trained in the stables, footmen who shared jokes in the yard, maids who nodded politely when passed, cooks who had sent down leftover pie when long drives ran late. He didn't want to believe one of them would sell a private moment for a money or favour, but scandal as a way of exposing the cheapest part of people. And money from London paper might look like salvation to someone desperate enough. A faint sound in the corridor made both men turn. Footsteps, then silence. The footsteps again, moving away. Hawthorne waited until they had faded. Lord Wimborne intends to question the senior staff himself in the morning. Thomas frowned. That will terrify them. Yes. Then whoever knows something may hide it more carefully. I know. Hawthorne's mouth tightened. Unfortunately, my lord is not in a mood to be advised. That, at least, Thomas understood. When Hawthorne finally left, When Hawthorne finally left, Thomas remained standing over the map long after the door closed. The room had gone quiet again. The estate lines blurred beneath the lamplight. Paths, trees, walls and windows, all the geography of a house that once felt orderly now feels full of blind corners and unseen eyes. He thought of Caroline alone upstairs, likely as wakeful as he was. He thought of being forced into silence while the house searched for a traitor. And with a suddenly painful clarity he knew one thing. If the witness had seen enough to ruin her, Thomas would have to act before morning, even if acting meant everything worse. Upstairs, Caroline gave up to sleep entirely. Nearly 2 in the morning, she lit a lamp and wrapped a shawl over her nightdress, pacing slowly across the room. The house had grown quieter now, but not still. From somewhere far below came the muting closing of a door. Once she heard raised voices, quickly hushed. Once footsteps crossed the landing outside and paused, as if someone had considered knocking before thinking better of it. She wished desperately that if it would be Thomas. She knew it could not be, and yet every creak made her turn. 2:30, another knock came. This time it was not Ellen, it was her aunt. Lady Wimborne entered wrapped in a dark wool dressing gown, her dark hair loosely pinned, her face pale with fatigue and worry. In her hand she carried not tea but a small silver flask and 2 glasses. Caroline blinked. Aunt? Her aunt gave her a weary little smile. Your uncle keeps brandy in his study for difficult evenings. I think this one qualifies. Despite herself, Caroline laughed softly and moved aside to let her in. They sat together near the fire, the brandy barely touched between them. For a while neither spoke, and her aunt said quietly, I do not know whether I am coming here as your aunt or as a woman who has lived too long enough to among the respectable lies. Caroline looked at her in surprise. Her aunt stared into the fire. When I married your uncle, I loved him very much. Caroline's heart softened. I know. Yes, but that's not the old story. Her aunt unfolded her hands around the untouched glass. There was another man before him. The room seemed to still. Caroline had never heard this. Had never imagined it. Her aunt smiled sadly at her expression. Oh, nothing scandalous. No one ever knew there was no newspaper, no grand decoration. No one waiting under an oak tree in the dark. Her eyes lifted to Caroline. Only a younger woman who cared for someone she could not marry because her family wanted security more than uncertainty. Caroline barely breathed. What happened? I did what I was expected to do. There was no bitterness in the answer, only old ache. I married your uncle in time. I grew very fond of him. More than fond. We built a life, a good one in many ways. She looked down at her glass. But every now and then I still wonder who I would have been if someone had once asked me what I wanted before deciding what was proper. Caroline's eyes filled. Aunt? Her aunt reached across and took her hand. I'm not telling you this because I think love excuses every reckless thing in the world. It does not. Nor because I wish to romanticize suffering. I've had enough of that from poets and men with poor judgment. A watery smile flicked across her face. I'm telling you because if this house is to withstand what is coming, then I want you to know one thing is very clearly. You are not alone in this. The words undid her. Not completely, not with tears and collapse. Caroline moved beyond collapse. But something in her chest loosened. She bowed her head over her joined hands for one trembling second. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. No, her aunt squeezed in her hand. Neither does your uncle. But God preserve us from determining he means to pretend otherwise. That made Caroline laugh through the sting in her eyes. Her aunt stayed nearly an hour. They spoke in fragments of fear, of reporters, of Thomas, of whether honesty was courage or madness, when the world had already decided to punish it. When at last her aunt rose to leave, a pause at the door. One more thing. Yes, if there truly is someone in this house who has betrayed you, we will find out. Caroline looked at her. Her aunt's face, usually so gentle, had gone unexpectedly hard. And if they have done it for money, I hope the sum was large enough to console them when your uncle is finished. and she left. Caroline stared after her for several seconds before an incredulous long laugh escaped her. It was the first moment of uncomplicated affection she had felt all night. Just before dawn, the house shifted again. Caroline had drifted at last into a shallow, uneasy sleep in the armchair by the fire, when urgent knocking jolted her again. She rose at once, disorientated, shawl slipping from her shoulders. "Who is it?" Ellen's voice answered from outside, breathless with alarm. "My lady, is Mr. Hawthorne. He says you must come downstairs at once." Caroline's blood ran cold. She opened the door to find Ellen, pale and wide-eyed, and behind her Hawthorne himself, more rigid than Caroline had ever seen him. "What is it?" she asked. Hawthorne bowed quickly. "I am sorry to disturb you, my lady, but Lord Wimborne requests your presence in the morning room immediately." "Why?" For one fraction of a second Hawthorne hesitated. This was all it took. Caroline knew that before he spoke about whatever happened, it was bad. "We have found the witness." The world seemed to tilt. "Who is it?" Hawthorne's expression was unreadable. "It is one of the housemaids." Caroline gripped the door frame. "A maid?" "Yes. She says she did not go to the newspaper." Caroline stared at what? She claimed she told someone in the village what she had seen, only in confidence, only as gossip, and then they took it to Mercer. The corridor seemed suddenly airless. "Who?" Hawthorne's voice dropped lower. She said the person she told was Miss Beatrice Pembroke. Caroline felt the name strike like ice. Lord Pembroke's sister? Beatrice Pembroke, sharp-tongued, socially ruthless, and notorious for knowing every whisper in London before breakfast. If she heard it even in a fragment. Caroline closed her eyes. Of course, the scandal had not merely wandered towards the newspaper by chance, it had been carried there. Hawthorne looked grim. "Lord Wimborne is waiting downstairs, my lady." Caroline opened her eyes. "There is more." Her stomach dropped. "What more?" Hawthorne's face tightened. "Miss Pembroke is already on her way here." The words landed like a bell tolling through the corridor. Miss Beatrice Pembroke, coming to Whitmore House at dawn, armed, no doubt, with gossip sharpened into leverage. And suddenly Caroline understood, with dreadful clarity, that the household's lockdown had come too late. The betrayal had already left the house, and now it was returning, dressed in silk, gloves, polite smiles, ready to demand its price. Oh, is it turning into blackmail, guys? I'll have to wait and see. So join me tomorrow, guys, for chapter 34, The Price of Silence. Yes, it looks like blackmail to me, guys, so let's see how they get on. But we've got more things to get through before we go back to Lady Caroline and Thomas the chauffeur. We're going to the little village of Willowmere for our Clockmaker's Secret story, and it's chapter 7, The Listener's Journal. You remember Clara had been elected as the listener reluctantly, so we'll see how she gets on with that. I think she's very modest, Clara. So anyway, guys, I hope you're enjoying the stories. It's a bit long, but it's getting a bit more intense. So there we go, guys. Take care now, guys. Thank you for joining me in Storyteller's Corner for Wednesday, the 8th of July. Have a lovely day, and thank you for joining me. Bye-bye now.